Best. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor Rawson, council, staff, and all the residents that took time out of your evening tonight to join us at the 2023 budget public consultation. The town of Penetanguishene is committed to ensuring our budget development process engages residents and provides opportunities for input. Following a budget survey that was published earlier this year in May, the public consultation is yet another opportunity to provide input, as well as attending any of our special committee of the whole budget meetings. During tonight's annual budget public consultation, I will be presenting our draft 2023 operating budget and our capital budgets for 2023 and 2024. Council will receive input from residents tonight and then can provide staff additional direction at our next budget meetings, one of which is to be held immediately following this consultation, and that's related to our capital budget this evening. And then again at our next budget meetings to be held on December 21st and January 25th. After this presentation, there will be a question and answer period that senior management is here. If you wanted to ask any more detailed questions, they can provide further information. So as far as our 2023 budget process, it did start back in April. So last spring, we worked on a 2023 budget timeline where we scheduled all of our budget meetings between April and January of 2023. We also did the 2023 budget surveys, a highlight of which I'll be going over tonight from the summary of the public surveys. In June, we then set our 2023 budget goals and objectives through a guidelines report that we presented to Committee of the Whole on June 8th. And staff were then directed to bring forward a draft budget of no more than 2.25% tax impact. In the summer months, July, August, September, management worked on their individual departmental 3-year operating budgets and 10-year capital plan. Staff's preliminary draft number 1 budget individually when submitted and consolidated came at a budget increase of $593,000 or about 5% increase. So then the next step of the process is we get together, the CAO and myself, as well as the management teams from each department, and we review their individual department budgets to reduce, to find reductions and reduce the tax impact even further. From there, we prepared draft number 2, which we presented to Special Committee of the Whole budget meeting that took place on November 30th. And the 2.25% tax impact that we presented on November 30th equals about $263,000 budget increase. And it's broken down between town operating of 1.65%, town capital of 0.43%, and policing of 0.17%. Which brings us to this evening, our public consultation, where I will summarize our draft number 2 budget, where we're sitting prior to changes for the next revision at 2.25%. As I mentioned, again, a special committee of the whole budget meeting will be held immediately following this consultation, where we'll review the capital budget documents by section, by department. And again, I did mention the meetings, December 21st, January 25th, hopefully for a recommendation to approve the budget, which would anticipated to receive final ratification from council on February 8th of next year. So again, I mentioned back in May, we did a budget public survey and the questions, I'll run through them quickly. There's quite a few of them, but 53% of respondents lived in a household of 2 people. 30% of the respondents, I might add, there were 70 responses to our budget survey. 30% were between the ages of 65 and 74. The top 3 ways of receiving information related to town's budget with social media, email notifications, and our tax and utility bill inserts. Then we listed our town services, indicating which services they feel should be enhanced, resulting in a higher tax increase, maintained, resulting in a moderate tax increase, or reduced, resulting in no tax increase. The highest under enhanced services were roads and sidewalks, arena and community center, and events. Under maintaining services, winter control, fire services, and environmental services. And reducing was community support, administration, and council governance. What town services are most important to you? The theme pretty well is the same year over year when I've done this budget survey. It's roads, sidewalks, winter control, parks and recreation, and fire and police services. Those were the top three that were most important to people. The biggest challenges facing our community: economic development, business retention and attraction, reducing, maintaining tax rates, deteriorating roads and town facilities. Rating the value you are receiving for your tax dollars. 6% said excellent, 39% said good, 36% said fair, 18% said poor, and I guess one person said very poor. Which statement best represents your position regarding taxation? 60% said I do support a moderate increase to maintain services. 31% do not support an increase, so reduce or change the services. And 9% said they supported a higher tax increase to enhance the services within the town. The top three suggestions in order to improve town services: proactive bylaw and visible policing, economic development and downtown streetscaping, affordable housing, development and growth to reduce tax impact. Top three services that the town does very well, needing little to no improvement. I do see a recurring theme every year with the same services. So kudos to winter control, parks and trails, and fire services. Additional comments. The results of the public survey are available online, and there were a lot of comments if you wanted to read it in more detail. But a recurring theme that I viewed out of the additional comments were keep tax increases to a minimum and implement long-term visioning and planning. So how did we get here this evening? Just looking back to our operating levy and capital levy from last year, from this year in 2022, our total town tax levy is about 9.8 million. And when you add policing tax levy to that of about 1.9, our total town levy is 11.7 million. So that's our starting point, and that's how we fund our 2023 budget. And obviously with all the changes and inflation and cost increases for 2023 that we anticipate, it was very difficult to come in at a 2.25% tax impact. A lot of the costs are out of our control, and we do have to ensure that to maintain the service levels that we have, that we have enough money in the budget to do so. So again, as I mentioned, back in June, we did the budget goals and objectives report. In September, management completed or started our draft one at a 5% tax impact. We then worked individually with the CAO, with management, and then a final all management team meeting to refine and reduce the budget down to 2.25%. On November 30th, we presented that draft number 2 budget to Special Committee of the Whole. And as I mentioned, our 2022 town levy at 11.7 million with the 2.25% potential increase, It goes up to about 11.9, almost $12 million tax levy. This is our 2023 budget tax supported only summary. And I'll just review by section where each section is at. If you wanted to look at it in more detail, certainly the budget is available online as well. This PowerPoint presentation is available on our website as well. Finance and Corporate Services has a 1.1% year over year increase, or about $28,000. Planning and Development Services has a 2.7% year over year budget variance of about $12,000. Transportation and Environmental Services, which is always the largest part of our budget, is 3.6% or $100,000. And Recreation and Community Services, which typically is the second largest part of our budget, is 3.5% increase over the prior year, which is $53,000. And again, as I mentioned, when you take into account the increase to the policing levy, as well as a slight increase to our capital infrastructure related to our preventative roads program of about $50,000, we are looking at a 2.25% tax impact, or $263,000 year over year difference. The next slide is really just a comparison of 2022 to 2023 by section. Again, as I mentioned, transportation, environmental, and finance and corporate services, as well as capital, are top three. Finance and corporate services includes fire. That's right. So they are our top three portions of the budget. Then we get into our rate supported operating budget. So that would be for divisions like building, water, and wastewater. They are rate supported divisions. And building is looking at almost a 19% year over year change of about $41,000. Water is about 5% year over year change of about $79,000. And wastewater is about 4.8% or $121,000. So in total, the rate supported departments increase year over year is about 5.7%. And then when you take into account the capital program that they fund, the water and wastewater departments fund out of their own rates of about an additional $600,000, but lower than last year, which really does just depend on the capital program and some of the larger projects that occurred in 2022 versus upcoming in 2023. So year over year, it is operating and capital, it is about $200,000 lower than the prior year, or a reduction of about 3.9%. And again, this is just a visual of 2022 versus 2023 for our rate supported departments, including the capital. And as you can see, capital being paid from our utility rates is lower in 2023 than 2022, probably because there was a large road construction project that they paid a proportionate share for in 2022. And wastewater being the largest rate supported budget out of all three of them. So when we look at our total budget from all funding sources, and that would be what I just went through, so taxation as well as our rate supported departments, we are looking at, as well as capital funding that is not rates or taxation, so other capital funding sources such as reserves or grants, development charges, etc. When you look at the total budget, compared to last year last year was about 22 million. And in 2023, it's about 19 million. So there is a reduction of 2.8. And obviously that would just be a change in the capital program from 2022 to 2023. The next slide outlines major drivers of our budget changes, which pretty well results in the additional $263,000 increase to our budget, which is the 2.25% that we're looking at. The major drivers of these budget changes are outlined, and again, it really doesn't it doesn't change. Somewhat it does year over year, but most years the same items are on there because those are items that we are committed to or we have no control over. So those are the salaries, wages, remunerations, and benefits, things like insurance, that's always on the list. We also have $57,000 additional debt repayment related to the Dunlop Street property. That $50,000 increase in our capital infrastructure related to the roads preventative maintenance program. There is an increase in our contracted services related to the transit program. And again, as well as our policing increase of about $115,000. So when we're faced with these increases, how do we fund them? So we did make a decision because we knew that the loss of the CNCC policing costs would impact our taxation for more than 1 year. We tried to minimize it. So in 2022, this year, we did stabilize it by about $178,000 to reduce the tax impact. And again, this year we plan on, for 2023, we do plan on using our tax stabilization reserve of about $95,000 to reduce that impact as well. So slowly that impact from the loss of the cost recovery, it will hit our budget minimally over several years instead of all at once. We do have, due to the growth occurring in our community, we do have increased supplemental and omitted tax revenues that have been coming in. So we adjusted our budget for those. And as well, we did anticipate and estimate 1.4% on new assessment growth, which again brings us down to the 2.25% broken out for operating, capital, and policing. Changes related to some of those items, as I mentioned, are out of our control in terms of collective bargaining agreements, legislative changes. There are increased expenses related to OMERS and WSIB that have been legislated. And also just to mention that the tax bill change that we will be looking at and that we will be presenting at a future special budget meeting will not see assessment increases because MPAC, the province, still has not rescheduled the reassessment that was supposed to occur in 2020, and current assessments being used for 2021 through 2023 are based on 2016 assessment values. The next slide just shows history of our debt reduction. So debt repayment is included in our operating budget. And in 2023, it's about $629,000 of principal debt reduction. We do have internal loans of about 3.6 million and external loans through Infrastructure Ontario debentures of about 11.8 million. So our debt currently is about 15.4 million. Just some other notes there. There was a year in 2019 where we did pay extra money in principal debt repayment, which council has approved on occasion to use surplus to reduce our debt. but also related to, we did pay out the fire hall and aerial truck debenture. And when it was paid in full, we did reallocate $150,000 to an annual transfer to the fire reserve, so that when it's time to replace that aerial truck, which is very expensive, the money will already be put away into the fire reserve, and we won't have to incur additional debt to do that. Cumulative debt reduction over the last 8 years has been about 6.5 million, or about $812,000 a year. And the ministry does apply annual debt repayment limits to municipalities, and we are well within our limit, currently at 34% of our legislated limit. So when we look at the potential tax impact of what is 2.25%, when you compare it to, this slide just shows last year's average tax bill for $100,000 of current value assessment. So in 2022, it was $1,035, and currently our draft budget of 2.25%, our tax bill, our average tax bill would be looking at about $1,058, or a $23 increase per $100,000 of current value assessment. We don't know the county or education rates changing. We don't know that until March, but we do estimate it. We do know the county is potentially looking at a 3.5% budget increase. So when I just apply that as an estimate to last year's county, average county rate on the tax bill, we're looking at an additional $9.77 for a total of $33 per $100,000 of current value assessment, but still overall a 2.25% tax impact. Typically, when we do get the county rates, because the growth in the south is a lot larger than the growth around here, sometimes it reduces our county levies. So it brings us in well below the 2.25%. But again, we don't know for sure until we get their tax rates in March. The next slide shows the tax impact history. So just quickly, year over year, there's the past 8 years. The overall tax increase, when you look at town, policing, county, and the province, the overall tax increase on average over the last 8 years has been 0.7% per year. The average municipal tax increase just for the town's operating capital and policing over the past 8 years has been 2.1%. So that 2.1% per year, when you take into account the county and the province's education rates, the overall rate does drop, and the overall impact has been 0.7% per year. Moving on, I'm going to go through some of our capital budget and capital funding history highlights. So from a tax-supported capital investment, over the last 8 years, we have invested $17 million, or an average of $2.2 million per year. The 2023 draft budget has about $2.44 million in it of taxation for the purpose of capital investment. There is a note on this that the 2.44 million is for the 2023 capital investment, but it doesn't include capital investment from carry forward. So that would be projects that are either multi-year from 2022 to 2023, or carry forward for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't get done and they were deferred to 2023. We'll go through that process after year end, once all of the 2022 invoices have come in and been recorded for year-end purposes. When we look at the total capital investment, not just tax supported, but all funding sources, 2023 draft overall capital program is $4.3 million. And over the last 8 years, the total net investment is about 79 million or 9.9 million a year on average. The next slide just outlines our long-term debt. And I did mention the debt repayment and it being in our operating budget. This is really just for information purposes. I already mentioned that our debt is about 15.4 million, internally 3.6, and externally with Infrastructure Ontario debentures of about 11.8 million. Some are tax supported, about 5 million, whereas other are rate supported. So the payments are paid out of the tax budget or the rate supported budgets. Obviously the rate supported $10 million is more related to the debentures related to the sewage treatment plant expansion, and their proportionate share water and wastewater of the Main Street reconstruction project. Again, the next slide is for information. It does identify our anticipated 2022 year-end estimated reserves and reserve funds that we have on balance of about almost $11 million. And the draft budget, we then input what we anticipate to spend or transfer more money into these reserves for an estimated 2023 year-end balance of about 10.6. So a slight reduction to our overall reserves, but that is because we are using them as financing tools. So we do transfer money into the reserve so that in a couple of years or whenever a large project comes up, the money is available and we don't have to use a lot of taxation money in 1 year. So we tuck money away in the reserve for some of the larger projects to fund them more easily. This slide is the capital investment related from using tax only. I mentioned it was 2.4 million. So this just shows by section, by department, where the bulk of the capital investment is occurring. And once again, public works and roads typically is the highest every year where we do spend our money. Finance and corporate services, about $650,000. That would include, we'll get into some of the highlights of the capital projects, but that would include fire as well to bring it up there. The next slide shows the total capital investment in 2023 anticipated by section, and it does increase because it's showing all funding sources. So in addition to our capital program, as well as our long-term financing for asset management, for fire, for public works and roads, it does total about $5.3 million for 2023. And 63% of that is for transportation and environmental. 17% or $900,000 is for recreation and community services, and 16% or $856,000 is for finance and corporate services, and planning and development, a small share, as well as the library, for a total of $5.3 million in 2023. Some of the highlights on the next slide. Some of the larger projects in 2023 that are in the draft capital budget for 2023 is bunker gear replacement for the fire department at $100,000, reconstruction of Harriet Street for public works at $655,000, Preventative road maintenance plan for $500,000, resurfacing Robert Street East and West at $450,000, replacing a sidewalk plow for $320,000, Navy Lane drainage improvements at $235,000, as well as a corporate-wide work order system at $120,000. Also, for wastewater and water divisions, they do have a share for the reconstruction of Harriet Street project of $175,000 each. As well, they're both replacing some obsolete equipment related to diesel storage tank at the main sewage treatment plant for $95,000 and replacing some obsolete equipment at the Payette station for $90,000. Under recreation and community services, there's a large Martin Valley Park Development Phase 1 project for $660,000 and a Trans-Canada Trail asphalt maintenance project for $60,000. Those are the highlights of some of the larger projects in 2023. But again, as I mentioned, later this evening, we'll be going through the entire 23 and 2024 capital budgets in detail. The 2024 capital investment using our taxation is about 2.4 million, not too far off of 2023. Again, 67% of that, or 1.6 million, is for transportation and environmental, public works and roads. When you look at 2024 total capital investment by section, it's almost 5.5 million from all funding sources, and 78% of that is for transportation and environmental, or almost 4.3 million. Some of the capital projects in our draft 2024 capital budget, some of the larger items highlighted tonight. For the fire department, they're replacing a support vehicle for $65,000. Public Works is doing expansion of the roads garage and wash bay for $1.2 million. Navy Lane drainage improvements for $985,000. Intersection upgrade at Robert Street East and Fuller Avenue for $800,000, and an excavator purchase at $190,000. Wastewater and water 2024 capital projects, pretty much the same, just different equipment, replacing obsolete equipment at some of the water and sewage station locations. Recreation and community services, Martin Valley Park bike track. I guess that would be phase 2 of that project for $200,000. Doing some trail work from Terrian to Overhead for $60,000, and a recreation master plan update for $40,000. Oh, forgive the small font on that slide. You'll have to go online and read that. That really is, in a nutshell, just more detail on the total funding, the total capital investment that I just mentioned for 2023 and 2024, but that's our 10-year plan. And just to highlight that it's $38.7 million from all different sorts of funding. So we do have some debt anticipated, development charges, donations, some reserve funding and transfers, and utilization of reserves, subsidies and grants, as well as taxation and water and wastewater rates supported. So the final line on the bottom is the total capital program for each year for the next 10 years. And I thank you. That's the end of my presentation. And if any of the residents that are here has any question, comments, or concerns, certainly I would be open to answer them, as our senior management team here as well.
That means you're expecting responses that was just online or that was
In total. Yeah. Pardon me? Prior year was 84. And prior to that, it was pretty low. So I was pretty happy with 84 and 70. So, but yes, it could be better, certainly, because we were pushing it out, social media and Facebook. We had hard copies and yeah.
Carrie, back on November 30th at the council meeting, there were deputations from 6 or 7 community organizations requesting grant money. And they were put over for further consideration in the upcoming deliveries.
Yep.
Of the budget. Are those numbers?
The report that went on November 30th, there are recurring contributions that we do annually to the same organizations. So they are in the draft budget at 2.25%. And if anybody asked for more than that, that was included in my report, and that's what was council agreed to consider during the next draft. So that's not all in there. But I don't have the numbers handy.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Anita Dubo. Your worship and members of council, I am here this evening to encourage and ask council to continue with the Main Street Art Project. This ad hoc committee was under the supervision of the planning department. Terms of reference were established to guide the committee, and a large focus was to promote our culture and support the businesses on our main street. With the reconstruction of our historic Main Street, areas of public art were addressed. The Committee of Council was to provide recommendations to council on location and installation of the public art, and to raise public awareness and demonstrate the importance of preserving our culture through art. 2 projects have been completed. Land of the White Rolling Sands, which is on directly in the middle of our main street. And the second one was the San Souci, which was just installed this fall up near the Shoppers Drug Mart. The 22 budget does have an allocation and a line item of $50,000. The money was not used for the second project because we received grant dollars. I'm here this evening to ask council to consider setting these dollars aside or place them in reserve for a project in 2023-2024. Setting the dollars aside would allow time for the 2023 committee to be appointed and discussion to take place. So that really is not a question to the finance department, but it is a question to council. I think we started this project, and as we have 2 now on our main street, extremely important to continue that process and look at the cultures of our community. We are a tri-culture community, so it's time to look at that. So I'm just encouraging council to look at that dollar and take it from this year's budget and put it into reserve or set it aside. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any other questions? Do you want to? Excuse me, do you want to come up to the mic there? Thank you.
I was just wondering, I know it is very important to have culture and art and everything displayed. And it's wonderful if we had money in the budget to do it. But with all the cuts that we've had and with all the turmoil that each town is facing, could we not just use that money and put it towards something else? And then maybe when we do get rich with extra funds, we can continue on. But in the meantime, basically, can I say, put our heads together and see how we can make cuts in the budget to look at how we can save taxpayers that extra revenue that they have to pay? Because not everybody could pay. And I think sometimes we forget that there are people in the area that are not as well off, say as myself or a few others. And I think we should think of them and their budget and what they can allow as far as paying extra money in taxes. And if we can just take that money, it's a wonderful idea. But does it have to be spent on that art and culture this year? I just basically think it is not a good cause. And I think a lot of people would agree that there's other areas that money could be put to and used more efficiently. That's all I have to say. That's my opinion, that basically.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? Come on up.
I just want to.
We actually need you for the mic for the video up top. People are online. Sorry to be a nuisance.
I'm Sandy Gilbank. I just have issues with the transit, the bus transit. People want to know why Lucy Street was taken off when the bus was going up Jeffrey Street, hitting Harriet Street, Ann Street, and Lucy Street. And then you got the Cancer Center on the right-hand side. That was one. And why is Midland getting free bus rides, bus tickets, and Penetanguate? Like, yeah, that's it. Yeah, like. Is everybody saying it?
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. To address the transit route change that was proposed, that was brought forward to our transit committee. It was actually a recommendation based on one of the operators in Midland that operate our transit system. We do have a very tight 1 hour route, and we weren't getting the ridership on that route. And that was the reason for that change.
And yet they'll take the bus all the way to Waypoint. From Waypoint all the way to the next stop, it's 15 minutes.
Mhm.
Waypoint used to have their own bus. Why can't they use that again?
Well, they used to have their own bus. They no longer provide that service now, and they're actually providing riders onto our transit service, and that's why the bus goes there.
Free passes.
Well, no, the riders, yeah, but it's.
Sorry, can I just interject? This isn't supposed to be a debate back and forth. If maybe we can just let the staff answer the question. And then if there's additional questions, we're happy to entertain them. We just want to keep a little bit of order to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Waypoint passes are actually subsidized by Waypoint itself, so the town gets that revenue even though the individual customer from Waypoint may not actually buy it themselves. So that's to address that one question there too as well. And to address your comment regarding the transit fare rides in Midland, they were providing a free transit service to their seniors due to a grant that they received. Town of Penetanguishene didn't get that grant or didn't apply for it. We've actually applied for that now, and we're actually waiting to hear back from the funding service to see whether or not we got that funding. So that was, sorry, if I can just finish. That's the reason why the town of Midland was providing those free transit rides, was because of the grant that they received. We didn't receive that grant. So the other component to that is that we've actually applied for that funding, and we're waiting to hear back whether we got it. If we do receive that funding, we'll be providing the same free rides to seniors as well. Okay.
Scary. I never majored in math, but I think I got this one figured out. By Carrie, by your presentation, if I read the numbers right, the budget is calling for water, looking for $79,000, 5.3%. And on November 30th, we heard a deputation from the library, and they're asking for around $75,000, close enough, to change 2 part-time staff to full-time. I just think the timing on the library, looking for $75,000 to change 2 people from part-time to full-time, it's just not right. Personally, I'm quite happy to pay $79,000 for something as critical as my drinking water or my wastewater and some of these other things. I kind of like the first pass of the budget. I think those numbers look really good. But when I see the library looking for that kind of money compared to water, that's just not the right comparison. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Come on up.
I'm Anna Sharon, and I have a question on behalf of another person or a few people that have been asking for more law enforcement in the town. Apparently, there is a huge problem with dogs not being on leashes. I have seen personally myself a lot of people that have scooters from Georgian Village and probably the homes on Harriet and Mariah that are using the sidewalks as scooters for their scooters rather than the road. The walkers, and a few of them are elderly people that I have seen from Georgian Village that also walk, have had to get out of the way. They may not have their hearing aid in as well. And some of them were very close to getting hurt. So is there any bylaw or any ruling for scooters that use the sidewalks, or what are they supposed to do? Use the road? That is a big concern. And then the other thing is the dog walkers that basically also do not have some of their dogs on leashes. And these dogs are not small dogs, they're large dogs. You also have to remember that there are dog walkers as well early in the morning when kids are going to school. And kids sometimes can get hurt if the dogs are not on the leash. And I'm just wondering, this was a big concern for a number of people that basically said, where's the law enforcement because they did call and were not able to get any assistance. And the other concern was basically why does the law enforcement department have such a low budget? When there's a lot of concern in regards to having areas patrolled or controlled, or if they have issues, they can't get them resolved. And basically, I guess a lot of them were told there's no money in the budget. So that was another big concern. Okay.
Thank you. Just in response to your comments, we always have had a small bylaw enforcement department. However, we've recently gone from 1 officer to 2 officers. Not recently, but I guess the past year we've had two in place. So we'll relay those comments through Andrea to that department. Okay.
People are complaining that basically the article walking into dog food, that people are not picking up, or else they're picking it up and throwing it back.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? No. Thank you for coming. And I guess we'll have a little break before our next meeting starts at 7 p.m. Thank you.
We'll call us to order. We're going to call our special committee of the whole for Wednesday, December the 7th to order at 7:01 p.m. Good evening, council, members of the public and staff. Welcome. Number 2 is our approval of the agenda. We have a recommended action that the special committee of the whole agenda for December the 7th, 2022 be approved as presented. A mover, please. Moved by Councilor Roux, second by Councilor Marchand. We'll call for the vote. All in favor? And opposed, and that is carried. Number 3 is declarations of pecuniary interest, either now or at the time of. Do any members of council have a declaration of pecuniary interest? Councilor Waters.
I have 2 items that I don't have the paper to tell me which ones they are. Do you need the page numbers? They both have to do with planning. One is the redesign of an office and the other one is printing of a map.
Thank you, Councilor Waters. So at the time, I'll just remind us and we'll make sure that's duly noted. Any other members have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. 4 is our finance and corporate services. A is our consent agenda. We have none. B is matters for consideration. And tonight is all capital. And we'll go through our capital that we didn't get to finish last week. And I'm thinking we'll start with T&E, Transportation Environmental Services. Carrie, do you want to do the same as last time? You'll do a high level overview and then it's probably to Brian. No, or just to Brian.
I pretty well did that during the public consultation. So yeah, we're just really delving into the projects this evening by section. So I guess we'll let Brian kick it off.
Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Your Worship. The 2023-2024 capital plan as submitted by the Public Works Department is a range of projects ranging from roads, sidewalks, drainage, related matters, and water, wastewater, utility rate supported projects. We do have the reconstruction of Harriet Street within our 2023 capital plan, which includes the removal and replacement of buried infrastructure, separation of combined sewers on that particular road segment, and the full removal and replacement of the road structure and upgrading the cross section to a full urban standard with sidewalks and storm sewers. As the treasurer noted in the earlier presentation, that project is taxation, water and wastewater rate funded project. And that's within the 2023 and a carryover portion in 2024, being the largest project that we have in our 2023 capital plan. We do also have a transfer to reserve for the Navy Lane Drainage Improvements Project. That's the first phase. So putting away some money so that we are prepared for the 2024 phase 1 construction. We also have some equipment replacements within the 2023 and 24 capital plan. One is a sidewalk plow, number 44 in our fleet, as well as a larger road resurfacing project, in addition to the $500,000 that we spend every year in our operating budget, which is the resurfacing of sections of Robert Street East and West. In addition to that, in 2024, we do have an equipment purchase, which is an excavator, which we utilize every year. Currently, we rent it, but this would be a purchase of an excavator for drainage and ditching projects. 2024, we have the actual construction starting on the Navy Lane Drainage Improvements Project, which is phase 1, which would be from Church Street all the way down to the water. And the intersection improvements, signalization at Robert Street East and Ed Fuller Avenue is also slated for 2024. And that's a high-level summary, Your Worship. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Any members of council have any questions regarding the T&E capital plan as presented? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Brian, one question first, and then we'll go to another one if that's all right. Thompson's Road Extension. How are we at that? Is all the money accounted for in this year?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor LaRose. That was a project that we initiated this year as part of our capital plan. We did install the water and sanitary sewer services this year, and we will be carrying forward with the storm sewer and actual road-based construction and trail for the remainder of the spring of 2023. So there'll be a carry forward project.
Thank you. And the next one is on page 243. And it is a road and sidewalk condition assessment. When was the last time we did one?
Again, through you, your worship, to Councillor LaRose, the last time we did a road and sidewalk condition assessment was in July of 2018.
Now, is there a chance of delaying that by a year? I just wonder, with our sidewalk plows that are out there, there's lots of people around the town. They do report generally when there's lifting, cracking, scaling, all that type of stuff. Is it absolutely necessary this year, or could it wait a year?
Again, through you, your worship, to Councillor LaRose, we do try to complete our assessments every 4 to 5 years. We're getting down to the 5th year of our assessment. It's more critical for the road infrastructure because the condition assessment, between 2018 and today can change drastically depending on the traffic conditions on a given road section. And we do base a lot of our road resurfacing plans, our 5-year plans that we submit on an annual basis to council on those condition assessments. And as soon as you get into 4 and 5 years out, that information is getting a little dated.
Thank you.
Any other members of council have questions regarding the Transportation Environmental Services? Councillor Vettabunker.
Thank you, Worship. Are we considering projects beyond 2023 and 2024? Are we getting into the forecast, or is it just 2023, 2024 at this point?
I think we're just doing the 2-year right now. Looking to our CEO.
Yeah, through your worship, certainly staff are speaking to the 2023 and 2024. We've presented the 10-year plan. So Mr. Chair, it would be up to you on how you want to facilitate that discussion amongst council in terms of questions beyond 2024.
Councillor Vettabunker, bring up your concern.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, my question has to do with the proposed reconstruction of Peel Street, and it's later in the forecast. And obviously, staff look at priorities within the capital program and determine which projects should come forward sooner, 2023, 2024. And I was just curious with respect to the Peel Street reconstruction from Robert Street East to Simcoe and then later to Brock. It's proposed later. And that I just want to understand the thought process that went into that. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate now or at a future time.
Sure. Can you go ahead on that one, Brian?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Vettabunker. Councillor, you're correct in terms of the prioritization of the capital projects in the plan. We'd love to bring forward Peel Street sooner in the plan. We do have other pressing priorities that are what we consider to be higher priority health and safety related items. While Peel Street's for example, the road surface desperately needs to be redone and the infrastructure underneath it. We do have other higher priority projects ahead of it. And given our taxation and water and wastewater capital allocations, this is where we had it funded and within our plan.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, and I appreciate that, Mr. Director, with respect to prioritization. And I know the planning and development section has in its 2023 budget a design project for Peel Street. I think it's to look at the parking. But when we were talking about it at council last year or the year before, we're not only talking about the road, but we're talking about the sidewalks on either side, and particularly the section between Robert Street East and Simcoe, which is in really bad shape. And I know that the way the project is presented, it's presented to Brock Street, which is another block in itself. So, and obviously more expensive when you're looking at two blocks. So my focus was on that initial phase. And from a staff perspective, I know we have to do the planning study first to realign the parking and all that. So I didn't think it would happen in 2023, but I thought perhaps in 2024 sooner, because I think it's proposed now. If I have it correct, I think it's a 2028 project, if I'm not mistaken, in the budget. So I just wanted to understand the rationale behind that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Brian, anything else on that?
Yes, and to further to Councillor Vancourt's comments, it is something that we could perhaps think about phasing the project. I think is what you're maybe suggesting, Councillor, as we did with the Chatham Street reconstruction project. And that's something that we could take back and present at the next draft of the capital plan if that's council's wish.
Thank you, Worship. I think if it's just looked at from that perspective and then we can consider it as a council, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other members have any questions regarding transportation, environmental services? Seeing none, I have a couple here. One, Brian, in the capital plan, it speaks to a ticket system of about $120,000 of capital. I'm just wondering if there's been any investigation or consideration with utilizing a system akin to the County Simcoe system, as opposed to looking to a capital outlay about a partnership opportunity with that, and if we can investigate what that could look like.
Thank you, Worship. Can you clarify which capital project that is? And sorry, what year again?
2022.
2023. A work order system. And yes, so the idea there would be to, if the project is approved, would be look at all the options, Your Worship, that would be the best fit for our corporation. So if there's other partnerships, that are out there that we could lean on, like the county work order system, that'll be looked at as part of that process, in terms of an expression of interest, perhaps. And in determining which software package would be the best to meet our needs. But certainly that could be looked at.
Thank you. Another one, Brian, is the intersection of Dufferin, Robert, and Burke. There's been some prior discussions at council of the past about the configuration of that intersection, and that it would be brought forward for future capital considerations. I don't see it currently in the current capital plan, even into the 10-year. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that, and if that's missing, should it be added, and what does that look like, and when can we expect to see that?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I believe this is an item later on in the agenda, but I'll address it here. It was an item that was brought forward last year as part of the consultation associated with the 123 Robert East development. And any upgrades or improvements associated with that potential development and that intersection. The report that was submitted to council late last year or early this year presented some interim options that were implemented earlier this year during the summer by the Roads Division as a means to help with the health and safety and the traffic movement at that intersection. So that part of it has been completed. So since the date of my last report, which was late 2021, if I recall correctly, there's been some new developments in terms of potential additions to that intersection that might come forward in the near future from adjacent development. And that has actually kind of changed our thinking about how the timing of any improvements at that intersection might take place. Actually, up until recently, November this year, I've been discussing with a traffic engineer that is been retained by a property owner in a very close proximity to this intersection that would have impacts, possibly substantial impacts to the alignment of this intersection and how it looks going forward. So thinking it would be preliminary to make any decisions related to the intersection at this point until that study's completed. What I'm proposing, and there's going to be a further committee of the whole report being presented to council on December 14th, providing council with an update on that. So what I'm going to be recommending is that we'll have an allocation for the town's portion associated with the improvements to that intersection, and having that project completed as part of future development applications that come forward at that intersection. Because not only is 123 involved or have a potential involvement at this intersection, there's also another adjacent development that will also play a contributory role in terms of how this intersection will look in the future. So that's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but we'll have a future committee of the whole report next week, actually, giving council an update and outlining what I just said.
Thank you, Brian. Do any other members have any questions for Brian regarding transportation environmental services? Seeing none, we'll move to our next section in one moment. But last week during our budget, we went quite long. We did have a public question from a resident who's here again this evening. So to be mindful of your 3.5 hour long wait last time, Mr. Hugan, I'll invite you to the podium and speak to our T&E issue now, and then we'll move on to the others. You're welcome to stay, but we'll deal with the transportation issue that's before us now.
Good evening, Mayor Rawson and Council. I wanted to introduce my wife, Ann Huguenin, myself, Tony Huguenin. Where we left off last week, everyone was tired, so I'm very happy to come back at this time when everyone's got well rested and energy. I wanted to just quickly explain the question that I was posing that had a direct relationship to the budget for 2023. And that was summarized in the handout that the members have with the transcript from last year's December meeting that Director Murray was referring to with his report. And my question left off where I believe you're starting now, and that would be where in the 2023 budget has the cul-de-sac option incorporating Robert Burke and Dufferin, where is it within that budget process? As a jump off from there, because Director Murray has already given comments, I have new information, not to waste anyone's time with old information. So I'll take the opportunity of the time you've provided to me with thanks, just to provide a neighborhood idea of how that current interim measure is functioning, and then a couple of comments to wrap up with. So I'll try to paraphrase because it's quite dry with traffic and directions of east, westbound, etc. But regarding the ongoing problems with the intersection with the interim measure installed earlier this year, I'll provide this list. And this list comes to me from a neighbor of mine that lives quite close to the intersection. And he gave me his permission to provide this information at tonight's meeting. So there's a couple of points here. So firstly, it's noted that traffic is backing up onto Robert Street westbound, as much as 6 vehicles deep at a time, waiting for the 3-street intersection to clear. Next, the intersection and how it's supposed to function is still confusing. It's been observed by the neighbors that we see the drivers are still finding it to be confusing. Who goes first, who stops, who goes with the yield sign. And I'd use the expression, sometimes it's a Mexican standoff. Who's going to go next and who's going to go first and who advances or stops. Next, vehicles are still stopping at the old blacked out stop line on Dufferin, just before Burke. And that's very likely to avoid westbound vehicles coming off of Robert to go on to Burke westbound. As well on Dufferin, large vehicles such as school buses and delivery trucks they actually straddle the intersection when they're stopped at Robert, waiting to make their turn either west or east. And thereby they're blocking the vehicles that are coming off of Robert westbound onto Burke westbound. The next I think is the most significant. Take a little bit of explanation if anyone wants me to clarify, but where you will have longer trucks that cannot make a continuous left turn when they're coming from stopped at Dufferin to go east down Robert. The length of the vehicle is so long that if they were to make a tight turn, they would wipe out all of the guard posts and the yield sign. So what's been observed is that they have to come to the right at Dufferin where they stop and then swing as wide as they can to turn left to go east down Robert towards Fuller. And then they stop while they're in the middle of the intersection at Robert. So Robert is blocked both eastbound and westbound. Then the driver will have to back up for a very short distance with a bit of maneuvering to be able to next go forward to not hit those guard posts and wipe out the middle island that was just installed this year. That's fairly significant because this all happens in the immediate location where the pedestrians are crossing across Burke from the new sidewalk from 2017 that was built on Robert and that was built on Dufferin, where it ends at Brule. So there's a lot of what I would identify as a dangerous traffic scenario with a large truck backing up while there's pedestrians right in the path of them backing. The other point was that just a simple pickup truck, an extended cab, which my neighbor does own. I've been told that there is just sufficient room to negotiate coming off of Robert westbound onto Burke westbound. There is just enough room to negotiate that quick right, quick left, quick right to be able to miss the guard posts and to stay out of the shoulder and the ditch. Carrying over onto that same concept of going off of Robert onto Burke, the longer vehicles have been witnessed, such as dump trucks and pickup trucks with trailers. Not only do the pickup trucks from trailers go in the out of Dufferin instead of trying to negotiate that S, but again, the tightness of that intersection to go from Robert West to Burke West, they are ending up onto the shoulder, and there's not a really deep ditch, but onto the ditch. So this leads to a couple of questions and comments. How is this sustainable, or how will it work in the winter when the snowbanks build up? How many times so far this year, which there may be some data on this, how many times so far this year has a guard post had to be re-erected that got hit? I'm myself familiar with 2 times where that has happened, where an orange pylon ended up down at my side of the street, 200 meters away from the intersection on a weekend. The Public Works put the orange cone back up 2 days later, but the guard post was obviously knocked down that I witnessed, as well as the neighbor. Next, the sidewalk that was built in 2017, the new sidewalk on Robert and Dufferin is for pedestrians, including children and seniors, to be able to safely cross Burke from the Robert sidewalk to the Dufferin sidewalk. And as can be seen from the examples that I gave of the problems with traffic movement, it's made the intersection arguably more dangerous. Certain aspects have improved, but in terms of safety of pedestrians, certain aspects have worsened. Further, this is a serious ongoing traffic problem here. And the examples that I had given of the traffic problems, they just reinforce the dangers. And what I see and what a few of my neighbors see is a simple solution, and that is to dead end or put a cul-de-sac at the east terminus of Burke. We feel, my wife and I, that the pending development at 138 that Director Murray had made reference to, with its possible new road joining up at that intersection, the 4-point existing intersection, would become worse with more chaos and with more confusion, with more danger for drivers and for pedestrians, as you would be creating a 5-point intersection. I'm sure everyone's heard of that concept of a 5-point intersection. Again, if there's no necessity to have a 5-point intersection, whether it be controlled by traffic lights, stoplights, which is fairly expensive, ongoing maintenance and initial cost, or an even more expensive remedy or option, a roundabout, which we have experienced locally at County Road 93 and Vinden and Gulf Link Road. My understanding is that was a $7 million project, and it was from 2 local roads coming into County Road 93, which is 2 lanes north, 2 lanes south. Quite the expense for that project for the county. So there's only 2 things that we know for sure from the town at this point in time. The first is the changes that were made to the intersection this year are supposed to be temporary solution. And the second, as was touched on by Council and Director Murray, the intersection will be reviewed in 10 years from now in 2032 under the Public Works Capital Plan for work on Robert East from Maine to Fuller. So the last question, can that be explained how the current intersection configuration is temporary and interim, 10 years versus when? Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe, Brian, you addressed this, that more is to come in your report next week. Do you have anything to add to that, Brian, or we stay tuned to next week?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we'll have a fulsome update in my update report for next week's committee of the whole meeting. But in the interim, be happy to meet and discuss with Mr. Huguenin or any of the residents in the area to discuss some of the items that have been noted in the letter that's been provided to council here, and looking to improve what's there in place as the interim measures to improve the safety and flow of traffic in the area. So we'd be happy to meet with Tony and to review that with our road supervisor.
Thank you very much, Brian. Do any other members of council have any other closing comments on transportation environmental services or the comments presented by Mr. Huguenin? Seeing none, we'll move on to planning and development. Thanks again for coming tonight and your patience over the last week and a bit. Moving on to planning and development, we'll turn it over to you, Andrea, to walk us through your capital plan for 23-24.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll be fairly brief. The planning department has $160,000 in total projects that are focused on growth, community growth and impacts where the town has a role to play, specifically around parking, housing, and some of those legislative changes that the province has recently announced. So 2023, we have a number of items that have been presented as well. 2024 is somewhat light in the number of projects. We are awaiting some of the strategic plan directions that would help us understand what the priorities of this council are and to be for community development. So to get right into some of the projects for 2023, we have a customer service improvement for the planning department. We've been budgeting money over the past couple of years to provide some new workstations for staff to be a little bit more accessible, as well as provide better customer service. We have a project to update our planning documents with respect to the County of Simcoe's Municipal Comprehensive Review. I'm sure you may not have much time to read into that document, but the MCR by the county identified that our employment lands, although we have enough lands identified, we're very, very close to not having enough. And I can tell you from experience, the lands we do have not always are suitable or are constrained by some other features. So it's very important for us to be able to have employment lands that are readily available or shovel ready for jobs coming to this town. A new proposal is the housing and green housing and housing and a green community improvement plan. This is specifically to address the affordable and attainable housing needs in this community, as well as our climate change action plan. So it is proposed to be funded by some of the reserves that the town had previously put aside for housing projects, and so it's not fully a taxation project. The parking strategy is something that's been discussed over the number of years. For those who've been following, we've been counting cars in the downtown and at the town dock. And so it's come to our attention that there may be some areas we can do improvement with respect to our downtown residents and their overnight parking needs, as well as the town dock project clearly identified parking as a need that we need to understand a little bit better for the use of that property. Another project that's been proposed for a couple of years is the Peel Street redesign. This has come about because of the parking conversation and the parking counts that we've been doing in downtown. Peel Street, as was identified between Robert Street East and Simcoe Street, is has some interesting aspects to it. Brian's project with respect to the whole design could be influenced and informed to make a better pedestrian realm, especially with the change to the waste collection systems that's happened since that design. So this is a project that we feel is important so that the public can become engaged with the needs of the community for that section of Peel Street. And then a small project around parks and school wayfinding signage just to help residents as well as visitors navigate through the town. So that's the 2023 projects. In 2024, we have a Town Dock environmental impact study. This is an important project to enable staff to know what are the environmental impacts with any in-water work that needs to be done. A business servicing map that was identified in our business retention and expansion study that was approved by council in 2021. That project was identified as a medium priority level, and so we put it in 2024. If you're familiar with our tearaway maps, there is on the backside of that tearaway map, there is a downtown business directory map, I call it, that was generated a few years ago, and it's in need of updating, but it's in need of continual updating as businesses move or relocate or new ones get established. We have a Bluefields study that also has been changed since it was originally proposed. This was done several years ago with our new official plan that identified the 51 Dunlop, the former high school, as well as Penetanguishene General Hospital sites. We call them Bluefields, which is a fancy planning term. And it refers to just examining those lands because of their importance strategically in the town and for infill development to ensure that we are setting ourselves up to make it clear that the community's objectives with those properties are met. So this is a project that has changed from originally because of the town's acquisition of 51 Dunlop. It would be only focused on the PGH site, the former PGH site. Lastly was a pedestrian strategy. This came about recently as part of the age-friendly strategy that was approved. And it identifies that this could be an area of investigation for sidewalk connections or in public land connections. It would look at sidewalks to make sure they're safe, smooth, pedestrian crossings have appropriate crossing time, and bus stops are well lit. So with that was pretty brief and pretty quick, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Any members of council have any questions for Andrew regarding planning and development? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. On page 280, should we be doing the parking strategy for the town dock before we have finished our town dock plan, or shouldn't we be waiting till we finish the town dock plan and then include the study at that point?
Through you, Your Worship, to Deputy Mayor LaRose. So I think what we heard through the public conversations around the town dock project that we really need to get a better understanding of the parking needs and demands down there. That would help, in my opinion, help inform the actual town dock design. We heard very loudly that, there are changes to the parking needs down there and they fluctuate from season and from days and weekends. But there's also parking needs with respect to the marina, the slips that are operated there. So I think it would be best suited to proceed the town dock plan, the master plan that we proposed, just so that we can go to the community and say that we've examined this a lot closer and have some information and data to share to be able to support a design.
could we do that later in the year? Because if we come back with a different town dock plan, I don't want to have what happened last time where it gets too far down the track. I'd rather see them done in conjunction.
Through your worship, the intent was to prioritize the parking strategy, if approved in early 2023, so that it could feed into the master plan project. The master plan project is a County of Simcoe grant that we received, and we've been fortunate to get an extension from the County of Simcoe on that project to the end of August of 2023. So I think they're going to be very closely in tandem moving forward.
Any other members have any questions regarding planning and development? Councillor Vedabunker.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Andrea. I learned a new term, a Bluefield study. I had not heard that before. I think it's an excellent idea. I'm just wondering, because it is a prime site within our community, is it you're proposing it for 2024? Is it not something, I see it was deferred from 2021, now it's to 2024. This seems to me there's some logic that we may want to move that to 2023 so that we have our plan ready. So when a developer comes in, because the property is for sale unless it's been sold and I'm not aware of, we've already done our planning work to inform the developer this is what we would like to see on the site.
Through your worship to Councillor Vadaboncourt, I would be happy to entertain advancing that project. We had set it up really just so that we would be a very high level study and that the details would be part of an actual development application. So we would set the framework, and it has changed and evolved over time, given that it originally encompassed 2 properties and now is only 1. The status of the ownership of that land and the ability to partner with an owner of that property is also something that needs to be discussed and fleshed out. So depending on when those conversations happen, I think 2023 might work, but it might be a bit ambitious as well.
Thank you. I have another question, if I may. With respect to the town dock environmental impact study, I appreciate the need for that. Could you tell me, have we done any geotechnical work at the town dock with respect to what development potential might be available there? I know the environmental impact study is one piece, but geotech would also be important in terms of determining what types of structures and whatnot could go on the property.
Again, through your worship to Councillor Vadaboncourt, at this time, I don't believe we have too much geotechnical information. I'm sort of looking at both Sherry and Brian on this one. But leading up to that, what we're working on right now is the capital budgeting strategy. And that's one of the line items, I guess, that's being investigated for how much will it cost, when should the timing of that be, and how are we going to fund it? So it is in the queue, I guess, but not reflected on the actual budget right now. For the 10-year capital budget.
Thank you.
Any other members have any questions for Andrea regarding planning and development? Andrea, a couple for me. One is the business service map, and I think I'll just make notice, Bill, Councillor Waters, I think this is one of the ones you said a declaration, so just so everyone knows you're not speaking to this. The business service map, I think, is in for 2024. Speaking of what you talked about, this is about helping our downtown business core and our work that's being done on the economic advisory group. What would that take to move that to 2023 to help support that project?
Again, your worship, I would be happy to entertain changing that date on it. It was allocated to the 2024 year, given the business retention study identified it as a medium priority, so not as an immediate need. So that was placed in the budget, I believe, for the first time last year. But if this council desires it to be advanced, then I'm happy to do so.
A couple more here, Andrea. One is the next one is the office furniture. I'm having a hard time understanding that one for 36,000. Are we in essence talking about getting some new desks? What does this look like?
Thank you very much. So this has been, I think this is the 3rd year we've been sort of tucking some money away on this project. So if you're familiar with the planning and development department, the internal sort of area where our administrative staff sit as well as the planner and the bylaw department, as well as all of our filing systems are all sort of mixed and very uncomfortable, I would say, in that area. I don't believe our desks are ergonomic. I know they're difficult from a customer service perspective. Our admin assistant actually will get up from her desk, have to go around her desk, go out of view of the public before being able to re-engage with them. So it's a bit awkward setup. This value was identified. We received a quote, I think 3 years ago when we initiated the project that estimated that should be the cost to create some new desks, stations, workstations, as well as some filing spaces. So that's the project itself.
To take off what our Deputy Mayor LaRose was speaking about the parking strategy, you spoke about Town Dock, Peel Street. Would the parking strategies at the end of the day to help us understand, can we get 5 spots, 7 spots, 3 spots? Is that what we're looking to achieve from the parking strategy on Peel Street? Just what's the deliverable, the objective of that strategy?
So the Peel Street is really a design project, not related to a strategy. There would be in the parking strategy, we may examine how we could use Peel Street parking, but not a design for the parking.
Okay.
That helps.
So that's design.
The design of Peel Street, correct?
Okay. And Andrew, my last question is regarding the pedestrian study. And you spoke about that briefly. So just so I can get that clear, are we trying to understand how we can make our walkways more pedestrian friendly? And I ask because we get inquiries all the time about broken sidewalk panels, and Brian's talked about some of being in the capital plan. My feeling is we need to put more money in our capital to fix what we have, as opposed to look at building out more. So I'm just wondering if this plan is going to tell us we need to build more sidewalks, is that the objective? Because we have more to maintain right now. So I just want some clarity. Again, what's the objective on this one?
Thank you very much. So just, it was identified in the age-friendly strategy that it works in tandem, I think, with Brian's work on review of the infrastructure itself, but it would also take a look at our public spaces, not just sidewalks. So it's looking how connections, whether they be formalized sidewalks or trails or multi-use trails, to make sure that they're age-friendly, I guess. And just look at all the spaces that the public use when they're moving about town. Whether it's, at a bus stop, how does that seating area work? How is it lit to those sidewalks, and whether or not they have appropriate access to crossings or appropriate markings for crossings. So it's a bit larger than Brian's, and it encompasses more than just roads. It would include public spaces.
Thank you. Any other members have any questions for Andrew regarding planning and development? Seeing none, we'll move on to recreation, and we'll turn it over to you, Sherry.
Thank you, Worship. So what's not demonstrated in the capital plan or capital carry forward projects? RCS does have a few smaller projects, just problems securing contractors and availability to do work within timelines. So we'll be focusing on completing some carry forward projects. One project that we'll be doing has been on the books for some time that we've been working towards is reconstructing a new town gateway. So we've done some design work. The engineering pieces are complete. We've acquired a new piece of land to move the Angels from the Thompson intersection closer to the municipal border. The Heritage Committee was consulted on this project, and the part of the history of the Angels was always to provide that sense of arrival to town, and that's been lost as the town has been built up around the Angels. Some people have noted, they've lived here many years now, and they don't even know the Angels even existed. So a lot of feedback was received with that project. And we have secured a grant through Canadian Heritage to help make that happen. So we'll be moving forward with construction this year, which is exciting, and secured some partnerships with different groups to do a large unveiling ceremony on Franco-Ontarian Day. So that's a big project for RCS. The other one that's two-phased for 2023, 2024 is Martin Valley Park. So that's the park at the end of John Street. It's central to Canadian Martyrs, Le Caron, and École Saint-Joseph. Lots of Harbor Point. There's going to be a fourth phase of development around there. So a lot of the town's growth has been around that park in recent years, and there's very little infrastructure in it. It's not considered accessible. There's no parking lot. We acquired through the development some additional parkland that's pretty unusable in its current state. So we have 2 grants out applications right now to help fund the project. It would largely be funded through, if successful with the grants, development and charges, as well as cash received in lieu of parkland. That whole growth pays for growth. This project is definitely growth based. So it will, in that project, will include expanding the playground, adding a parking lot. There'll be an outdoor classroom that would be added. We did consult the 3 surrounding schools and they all loved that idea. There'll be a covered pavilion and some additional seating, which falls in line with our age-friendly plan to provide more seating and rest areas in our green space and open spaces. Phase 2 of that would be the lower part of the park, and that's the acquired parkland that we received, and that would be the development of a BMX pump track. So it's cycling infrastructure, mostly probably accessible by youth, but obviously appealing to everyone to come and utilize. When we did the public open houses on the concept designs, obviously that was the feature that all the kids got excited about. And as such, the Friends of the Youth have confirmed that they will provide a $75,000 donation to help make that a reality for the town in 2024. So those are the 2 major capital projects. A couple trails projects, one for next year, the paved pathway, the Trans-Canada Trail that goes through the waterfront park is getting in fairly rough shape. We have to do some patches for some heaving and presenting some hazards. So we're hoping to source some grants to help repave the troubled sections. And then there's also a project in 2024 to install a French drain on the Trans-Canada Trail from Overhead Bridge Road to Terrier Park. So currently there's a huge ditch there, and it's constantly fills with sediment, and it has to be ditched regularly, and creates a hazard for the trail users because of the ditch that's there. So looking to install a French drain and improve that area. Just looking at and the other piece you will note in both 2023 and 2024 is a transfer to reserve. We do know that staff and council have some work to do with respect to the future of the town dock area, as well as the Arena Recreation Center study. So we are putting money away for the rec facility piece for some decisions to be made by council. And our capital plan, I think, will further be defined in the coming years with respect to the rec center discussion, as well as the wharf discussion. There's lots of work that needs to be done there as well, and we haven't formalized any plans. We do know for council's benefit, we were planning to invest a bunch of money into the Tourism Information Center, the TIC. It needs substantial work. We brought a report to council and they said, you know what, let's just wait. It's probably cheaper to rebuild, and we may be moving it closer to the road with part of that wharf plan. So there was definitely an appetite for that. So we'll need to put some placeholders in there once council provides direction for that project. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Sherry. Any members of council have any questions for Sherry regarding RCS? And I'll turn it to you, Councillor Leroux.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in reference to the dock area, I don't see much of it in 23-24. Sherry did hit on it about the tick and so forth, but I'm aptly referencing the parking or the exit from the parking lot. down there at the town dock. The exit area road portion, as you exit off the parking lot, is in terrible, terrible condition, terrible state. The stretch of it that I'm thinking that we should possibly be looking at this coming year in 2023 of at least doing a cutout there and a resurfacing. I'm sure Sherry is quite aware of the area that I'm speaking of, right as you go off the parking lot area, getting onto the secondary road. It's a piece of about, I don't know, maybe 150 feet, but it's very, very bad shape. And I think we should be looking at least doing, because we're not looking at doing anything strategically for some time, that we should at least look at that small section being repaired. Thank you.
Any other members have any questions regarding RCS? Councillor Waters.
A little bit of clarification. I noticed there's a line where they're asking for $10,000 for hot water tanks, 2 hot water tanks. Was there anything special about the hot water tanks, or are they similar to what I might have in my home?
Through your worship to Councillor Waters, I apologize. I'd have to consult with the facilities manager in order to answer that question.
Okay. And also, as a second part of that same question, I noticed in the other writing that the hot water tanks had exceeded their life expectancy, although they're still working. Is it possible to have them replaced when they break, and perhaps have the 2 of them replaced at the same time to save on some labor, but rather than replace them ahead of time, wait till one of them actually breaks and then do 2 at the same time?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Waters. The intent is to replace them. I believe at the same time. They've already exceeded their useful life. We can certainly keep that money in the budget and hold on to that money and only spend it when they go. However, given it's a public facility and we would rather not have to shut water off and deal with all that stuff on the fly and pay for emergency repairs. I think it's more efficient and provide better service if we proactively replace them, particularly given the age of the units.
Any other members have any questions for Sherry regarding RCS? Councillor Vadabunker.
Thank you, Worship. My question has to do with the Arena and Curling Club structural assessment. And I understand the reasons for it. It's outlined in the budget. It has to be done every 5 years. And that'll give us a good indication and build on studies that have already been done fairly recently with respect to the structural condition of both the Curling Club and the Arena. I was just wondering, when was the last time that we looked at the mechanical systems of both of those facilities? And is there any advantage to roll in the mechanical systems as part of the structural so that we get a full update on how these 2 buildings are operating? Thank you.
Thank you through your worship to Councillor Vadaboncourt. The building condition assessment for the Arena was completed in 2017 and for the curling facility in 2019. They speak to the HVAC systems and when we should be replacing them. We actually did just replace some at the Arena as part of the roofing project. I would have to go back and look what it says about the curling club. I do believe they are in need of replacement sooner rather than later, if memory serves me correctly.
Follow up, Councillor Vadabunker.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I think that my interest is the mechanical systems, not only the HVAC, but the ice plant, everything connected with the operation of the building so that we have a good sense in 2023. This is where the building is at from a mechanical standpoint, from a structural standpoint. You can expect this many years, of continued useful life from this point forward, because I think it might be helpful for future planning. And I think some of that work's already been done, but I'm just wondering from a standpoint in terms of having up-to-date information, if there's any advantage of including the mechanical systems as part of that the structural assessment as well.
Thank you. Any other members have any further questions? You have a question, Brian?
Thank you, Worship. It was just a response to Councillor LaRue's comment about the what I'll call the turnaround at the town dock and the condition of it. I do believe Councillor LaRue that section is within our 5-year resurfacing plan. I don't believe it is next year, but it is within our 5-year preventative road maintenance plan for resurfacing.
Through to Brian, thank you, Your Worship. Through to you, Brian. Then, when you say in a 5-year capital plan, is what are we talking about resurfacing? Are you talking the entire dock area, or just
the turnaround, which would be well, let's call it the northern extent of the main street at the turnaround by Beck Boulevard.
Yeah.
It's not the town dock parking lot itself. It's more the
and the area that I'm talking about is not actually the turnaround or the turnabout. It's the part that when you get on or you go on to the turnaround.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There's a stretch there.
Okay.
That's the part that I'm referring to.
All right. No, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Sherry, a couple of questions from my lens. One is about the Rotary Trail winter maintenance. We've had some inquiries of late, and I have for a few years. And as you know, there's been several petitions and people asking about utilizing at least a portion of Rotary Trail in the wintertime. And I know you've articulated that it hasn't been designed with proper drainage and the like. So I'm wondering, with this placeholder amount that's there, can we look at that as a possibility that a portion of that walkway could be a future state trail that could be utilized in the winter state? So I'm just wondering about that Rotary Trail and tying in the winter maintenance component for using that from an accessibility standpoint in the future.
Thank you for the question and bringing that information forward. I can certainly consult with my friends in Public Works about drainage and what sort of investment would be required to add the infrastructure necessary to make the trail better set up for winter maintenance.
Thank you. Two more, Sherry. Next one is the Recreation Master Plan update for $40,000 in 2024. I'm wondering what's the value and the objective to the municipality? We have a lot of studies, and I still have the 2014 study at home that has some good data, but are we creating studies that get shelved and is it being part of what we're doing? There's lots of work being done with, we'll call it arena feasibility and otherwise. So I'm just wondering, what's the tangible objective, concrete work that's going to come out of that to the municipality?
Thank you, Your Worship. The Rec Master Plan is certainly a living and breathing document that we follow. A lot of where we went with the assessment of 51 Dunlop for a future arena, what our future rec needs might be, was directed from that. Our playgrounds, looking at our playgrounds and our strategy for replacing them was derived from that. So it certainly is a living and breathing document. It is best practice to have them updated every 10 years. So much changes in that time, and they're based on demographics and growth and a variety of pieces. I would also suggest, and I don't know if I'm premature, but with all the changes happening with the province, that it's potentially legislated that municipalities have to have a parks plan. And I'm not sure that our rec master plan would be considered a parks plan. So I think that placeholder is good to be left in there for 2024 in the event that we have to see that through.
Thank you. My final question. You brought up about the movement of the angels down the highway, and you spoke about some grant money. I'm just wondering if you can help me understand what's the cost to the municipality over and above what we receive from a grant perspective to make that project happen.
So the construction portion, the construction is anticipated to cost $390,000. We won't know for sure until we actually go to tender and get the results. The grant pays for 50% of that. So I can certainly will be reporting back to council once we receive the tender results. We have already spent grant money on the project. They've already sent us funding for the land acquisition pieces, for engineering costs, things that we've already incurred.
Any other members have any questions for Sherry regarding RCS? Councilor Leroux.
Thank you, Your Worship. As some of you may have noticed or noted, this past week, we've had some graffiti work down to our Champlain statue down there. And some years ago, we had discussions here at council in regards to possible cameras down in the Rotary Champlain-Wendat Park. It was brought forward. We had police reports on it, and then it kind of went by the wayside. And I'm wondering if perhaps somewhere along the line we should be looking at that again, particularly on the Legacy Walkway, because we have some very expensive statues all along that walkway, and then including the Champlain statue itself. Graffiti is one thing, but if they start getting into destruction is another matter. So maybe something to consider.
Councilor Leroux, do you want to look at adding some of that to the capital here? Do you want to look at a referral item in the future? You want to look at a good idea fund? How do you want to proceed with your idea?
I think at this point in time, it would be a referral item.
Okay, thank you. Any other members have any questions regarding RCS? See none. We'll move to FCS, and I believe, are we starting with you, Jeff, or Carrie? Or someone else? To the CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Carrie, am I going to start and then we're going to dive into fire? Is that, or are we going to start with fire? I will kick it off. Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to FCS, I think you see 3 projects in the 2023 proposed capital plan. The first one is it's a corporate hardware software replacements. It's an annual investment in our IT infrastructure. I think we all know the importance of investing in our IT infrastructure. And this is anything from, these devices that are sitting, in front of a lot of us this evening, but also a lot of back-end hardware, servers, etc., as well as software. We have several pieces of software in this organization, right from our core financials right through to service excellence software, online services, etc. So this is an annual investment to ensure that we're not falling below standards, and our provider is in a position to be able to service them accordingly. The next one is with respect to audiovisual upgrades here in council chambers. So this is a project that essentially the equipment that you're seeing in this facility or this room this evening is upwards of 16, 17 years old. A lot has changed in 16 or 17 years. And certainly, I think the pandemic has given rise to the importance of, conducting business in a means outside of the traditional means, which is us sitting here this evening. So certainly a goal to be very customer centric, open, transparent, and readily accessible government, and really making it easy for our residents to get engaged, to participate, and really understand what's happening in their community. This is right from the audio visual that you see and the sound system, the audio system. There are several challenges with the current structure, the current setup. It is more labor intensive, as you will often see with Sarah in the back corner. So this is really an opportunity to become far more efficient, but also an opportunity to look at our live streaming. Is there a better way that we can engage our citizens, engage our residents, so that it makes it easy for them to go back and watch, go back and search, go back and understand what has happened in our council meetings. So it really is a wide array, a wide spectrum of a project. And the last one that you're seeing under administration, and I'll kick it off and I'll ask my friend over in RCS to chime in if there's anything I miss. But the last one is really a facility key fob system. So this is an important one. This is one that we're proposing to fund from a municipal modernization reserve, as well as a small portion of rate supported water and wastewater. But really looking at the points of access across a number of town facilities. Currently, we have a keypad system at some of our facilities, not all of our facilities. So it does create a security risk, to be blunt. The way that things have evolved, we have had situations in the past where potentially staff and or municipal assets have been compromised by simple virtue of it is very labor intensive to change codes. So when we have staff leave, we have staff retire, and in general, it takes time to change codes, and it also provides certainly a sense of security for not only our assets and our municipal records, but also for staff ourselves. So that really touches on the three, and I'll carry on with 2024 if that's okay, and then ask I guess fire to dive in. With respect to 2024, again, we've got an annual hardware software project proposed, which is really, as I said, it's annual. It's really I think it's a must-have, to be blunt, just to maintain our systems the way they are. We've got a development charges study that's being proposed in there, which certainly staff will consider under the new provincial legislation. That may be able to be pushed out, but that's something that staff are going to review and consider. And as it's noted, it is proposed to be funded through DCs, which again may have some implications in the legislation. And the last piece is a town hall standpipe repair replacement. In our 2019 building condition assessment, it recommended that every 10 years that we replace the standpipe as part of the fire protection system as a preventative measure. So I think these are the types of things that make our fire chief and our fire folks in general smile, because it's a preventative measure from a fire protection perspective. So we've not identified that as a high project. That's certainly one that we could consider pushing out further, but we are looking at it from a preventative measure. Your worship, those are the administration pieces, and with your indulgence, we'll ask the fire department to carry on.
Chief Ryan. With permission of the CAO, if I could speak on the fob system, is that okay? So a number of years ago, I was tasked with an issue that happened in the municipality and doing the rekeying in that. And during that time, like the CEO has indicated, it's very labor intensive. And I understand that labor is labor and we have labor all the time. However, during that process, it really came to light how vulnerable some of our facilities are. And when you take our facilities and the value of the facilities themselves, let alone the human resources and the equipment resources, like we really need to better protect those assets. We're talking millions and millions of dollars. So I just wanted to bring that up because it wasn't until that point that I realized, well, some of our facilities are very vulnerable. And I would suggest that council really needs to consider that one. So there are a few fire hall projects. One you'll see in 2023, and that's a deferral from 2020 when COVID started. And we were looking to defer some capital funds in that. So that's in a reserve, and that's to paint the fire hall bays. And one of the new ones that's been added is to put a cover over the rear door, which is the main entrance in which the firefighters go into the building to respond to calls. And they've identified it as a bit of a health and safety concern with the way the weather and the snow blows in and around the back of the fire hall. So there are times in which they're going through, ice and lots of snow and things like that. So we've had some preliminary discussion. And we've also kept an eye on it, say, over the last year and a half. And there is an issue at that back door. The other item that we have is a shared community assessment risk plan with our neighboring fire departments in North Simcoe. And that's a legislative requirement from the province of Ontario that has to be submitted by 2024. And what the plan will do is it'll be similar to the community safety plan that was done a couple of years ago with all the municipalities. There'll be some things that are specific to all 4 municipalities, but then there'll be some items that are specific to individual municipalities. So they'll look at the types of occupancies that we have in Penetanguishene. And for a municipality our size, we do have some unique occupancies. We have a traditional older downtown core in which some of those firewalls that were built 100 years ago may or may not still be in place. So they'll look at that. They'll also look at like places like the Georgian Village, Waypoint, CNCC. For a small municipality, those are unique opportunities, and they'll then gauge the risk that the municipality faces and how we respond to them. So that's what that plan is for. The bunker gear replacement has been an ongoing project since shortly after I arrived here. The NFPA standard is every 10 years, the gear needs to be replaced. So we have a program because we don't have an abundance of firefighters that we actually replace the gear every 5 years, and the current gear that's reached its 5-year lifespan becomes the spare gear, and then the new gear comes in. So if we had a fire tonight and the firefighter's gear is dirty, wet, soaked, that goes back, it gets laundered, it gets prepared, it dries, but we have a second set of gear. And this came to light a number of years ago. Those that were here in the municipality and that were on council remember when the old Bullwinkles burnt, and we were there for like 12 hours fighting that fire. All the gear was wet. We hung it up in the old fire hall, and a couple of hours later, we actually had a kitchen fire. And I'm one of those individuals that got steamed because my gear was soaking wet. So the object is, it is a health and safety concern. So it allows us to be prepared immediately for another response in the municipality. So those are the 2023 projects. And in 2024, one is a replacement of support vehicle C2, which is our 3/4 ton, which tows the Argo. It carries all our bush firefighting equipment and things like that for forest and grass fires. The other one is the replacement of ice water rescue equipment. And that equipment eventually gets to the point where there's probably more water coming into the suits and being kept out of the suits. So we're looking at that. And then like any other asset, like our homes and that, eventually you have to do some upgrading in order to maintain your asset. And we're looking for some money to replace the tile flooring and some of the carpets at the fire hall. And despite the fact that everybody or a lot of people in the municipality, when they stop me, say, "Hey, how's the new fire hall?" It's 13 years old now. So it's getting up there. So that's what I have on those projects.
Thank you, Chief Ryan. Jeff, is there any other members speaking to any FCS, or we got it all covered?
I think we're good, Your Worship.
Members of council, any questions for our staff regarding FCS? Councilor Roux, looks like you do.
Well, your worship, I was just wondering about it's showing here under 24 development charge study. And I guess the question that I have now is, do we have any idea how we are going to be or how we are financially impacted by Bill 23 vis-a-vis development charges?
Great question. That was one on mine as well. And we'll turn to Jeff or Andrea or Carrie.
Your Worship, I think I'm going to suggest that perhaps our Director of Finance and or Andrea speak to it. One of them can jump forward and take the mic, and
Looks
the
like
other
Carrie.
can piggyback.
Flip a coin. Carrie go, and then Andrea can follow.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor LaRue's question. So I will comment on the development charge in the 2024 capital budget. As the CAO mentioned, related to Bill 23, portions of which received royal assent on November 28th, one being that the development charge study is not development charge eligible to be paid for using development charges. So we have historically funded that study through our development charges. So that will be a change that I'll be making in the next draft of the capital budget because we can't pay for it out of development charges. But once we do implement it, it will be a 10-year study that needs replacing rather than a 5-year study that needs replacing. As far as the changes that relate to development charges and the potential exemptions and phasing in of development charges, we haven't analyzed the financial impact yet, and I'm not sure that we know quite yet, because it really just depends on the types of development applications that we're receiving. And if any of them are relevant to the new legislation, then obviously province-wide municipalities, I've heard the number, is in the billions that are going to be lost. And through an AMO letter, an Association of Municipalities of Ontario letter, I believe it was Minister Clark that commented, don't worry to the municipalities, we're going to make your development charges whole. And I don't know how they can do that or what that comment meant, but I'm anxious to see what he meant or follows up with from that. So I know Andrea did write a report on the implications of Bill 23. And certainly any new information that we receive that we analyze, that if there's developments coming down, future developments that we're aware of that do fall under this new criteria in the legislation that impacts our development charges, we'll certainly bring that information to council as soon as we have that.
Thanks, Carrie. Andrew, any further follow-up on that, or is that covered? Thank you. Jeff, anything else? Councilor Ruth, thanks for bringing that up. I think everyone had that written down to speak to, so thanks for bringing that up. Any other members have any questions for staff regarding FCS? Councilor Vadabunker.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the bunker gear replacement, it happens every 5 years, and this is our time in 2023 to do it. It's $100,000 tax levy impact. I'm just wondering, and this is more from a financial standpoint than from a fire service standpoint, would there be any advantage of just putting $25,000 a year away in reserve for 4 years and then funding another $25,000 in the 5th year and then paying for it, as opposed to once every 5 years, there's $100,000 hit on the tax levy?
Great one, Councilor Vadabunker.
Sure, moving forward, that's always an option. It does reduce it. However, we have historically waited for the 5 years, but we could certainly, that could be a recommendation in the transition between myself and the new chief, that we have that discussion. And then after 2023, maybe that's, in consultation with the CAO and the director of finance, that's what we do. Similar to what we do in relation to replacing the big red trucks, if for lack of a better term, we now put money in there for funding those big ticket items. So we could. And then also, if you want to look at it that way, it's probably a good opportunity to look at our SCBA replacement, which are every 10 years, which run in around the $300,000 mark. So moving forward, fresh ideas, fresh eyes, new drive, there may be an opportunity to look at that and space it out over the SCBA, a 10-year period, the fire trucks on an annual basis, and the bunker gear, like Councilor Vadabunker indicated, certainly do it over 5 years.
I would echo your comments, sir, Councilor Vadabunker. I think what you're suggesting is we fund the 23 as Chief Ryan said, and then add the 25,000 from 24's capital plan onwards as an always event.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Yes. And I had a second question. It had to do with the replacement of the support vehicle. Does that vehicle, when it's replaced, does that go into our surplus fleet or to be redeployed somewhere else in the municipality?
So in the past, when we've replaced a support vehicle for fire, those vehicles have gone into to a surplus or to other departments, and then there's a continual use for them in a secondary role and not a first response role.
Thank you.
Follow up. Any other members have any questions regarding FCS? Councillor Marchand.
Yes, I have a question with regards to the AV system. just the general question of the idea of continuing on Zoom and having that as an offering on a regular basis for our citizens. And I do understand the need for some of the updates in this room, but is that thinking that we would continue to offer that as well?
Through your worship, absolutely. The intent is that we would continue offering the remote participation for our community, as well as leverage it from time to time for members of council that may require it, but also for staff that may require it. And as importantly, members of various organizations that would come delegate or present to council as well. So the short answer is yes. The long-winded answer was prior to that. So.
Any other members have any further follow-up? Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify so that so deputations, the intent is that it be a two-way interactive. So like when we had deputations last week, they were able to do it on Zoom and not have to be here as well. So I just understanding that from just being new, so that if someone is at home and if they submit their question, they could do it through Zoom as well. Like a citizen could do that.
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, I think it's a two-part question. So the answer to the first part is yes, we do allow delegations and presentations virtually and through remote means. And then I think the second part is allowing residents to submit questions. When we on our agendas under question period from the media and public, we do allow members of the community to submit their questions electronically. We have Zoom set up where, you know, we have to, and I'm getting a little bit technical, but we have to promote people to the panel to actually speak. But for folks that want to submit questions, we do have a mechanism in which they can do that. But essentially they're a viewer, only a viewer, and they can't just pop on our meetings without any control from us in the back end. Hopefully that provides some clarity.
Any further questions regarding FCS for staff? Very good, council. So we've gone through our capital budget tonight. I guess what we'll start with, is there any additions, revisions to the capital plan as presented, or are we moving forward with capital as presented? So I heard you, Councillor Vadavonker, bring up about the fire bunker gear. I think what you're proposing is we fund what Chief Ryan's presented and adding a new 24 reserve placeholder and move forward. Is that right? So it's a move. Do we have a second on Councillor Vadavonker? Councillor Roux, we'll call for a vote on that. All in favor? And opposed? That is carried. Any other additions, revisions, deletions from the capital plans presented by our staff tonight? Councillor Vadavonker.
Thank you. Again, it was my earlier question because we have been presented the 10-year forecast, and there's been some projects that are proposed in the latter years, and I raised the one about Peel Street, and we had a discussion about that, and the director is going to look at that. There's another one that's proposed a little bit later that I'd like to speak to, but I'm not sure if I'm to speak to it tonight or when we discuss outer years of the capital forecast.
I'm welcome to speak to that. I just think from everyone's point of view, this is all new, and maybe we can get into the 10-year after we've gotten through. I think from staff's perspective, they're looking at getting our capital done and operating budgets and they move forward, but happy to speak to it tonight if you wish.
Okay, if I could take a
Yeah,
minute.
for sure.
So it has to do with a study that P&D is proposing for 2025, and that has to do with the secondary plan for Ojibwe Landing. And we're just finishing up all the environmental work. We're doing all of that. I think that's going to be finished in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And we're looking to see those lands redevelop. And it would seem to me that once that study is done, that we should be kind of segueing right into the secondary plan for Ojibwe Landing so that we have our planning framework designed. But what I read in the capital forecast is that because it's not proposed until 2025, we're going to have a year, maybe a year and a half lag in there to get those lands really ready for development. We're doing a very important piece right now with the environmental piece, and that'll define the area and whatnot. And then we need to have an idea in terms of what we want to see happen on that property. So I just wanted to bring that forward as a conversation piece. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Vadavonker. I'll look to council if you want to move forward with this tenure. My feeling right now is this kind of ties into some of our strategic work, which we're going to be diving into soon. And I think there's lots of moving parts in here. I think from staff's perspective, our focus is operating budget right now in a 2-year capital. And then maybe in the new year, once we get more land under our feet, we can dive into the 10-year, because you're bringing up some great points, Councillor Vadabunker. I'm just not sure if everyone's headspace is there tonight. So if everyone's okay, we could park that and come back to this in the new year. Is that fair, Councillor Vadabunker?
Yeah, thank you. That's reasonable. I think it's ripe for discussion in terms of the timing of this next part of it. Thank you.
Any other members of council, any additions, revisions, deletions with the capital budget for 2023-2024 as presented by staff? Seeing none, we'll vote on this. What we'll do is we'll parse out the two items that Councillor Waters brought forward. So we'll parse out those two items. They're both planning and development. One was capital regarding, I don't remember the number, but office layout. And the other one was the map, tearaway map. So Kelly, you know what those are. We have that properly documented. So we'll remove those two out of the motion. So with fairness, Councillor Waters, we're voting on everything except those two. We'll do those separately next. So we have a motion that the 2023 capital budget draft number 2 budget documents be received for information and discussion. The staff amend the capital budget as directed and present draft 3 at the next special committee of the whole budget meeting on December 21st, 2022. With these two pieces that have been parsed out, that Councillor Waters call on declaration of pecuniary interest, P&D capital, office layout, and the tearaway map. Those two have been removed, which we'll be voting on. We'll call for a mover. Councillor LaRue, a second. Deputy Mayor LaRose, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? And opposed? And that is carried. And Councillor Waters has declared a pecuniary interest on those two items, the plan development capital office furniture and the tearaway map. So Councillor Waters has declared that. We'll vote on those two separate items, that the 2023 capital budget draft number 2 budget documents be received for information discussion. And the staff amend the capital budget as directed and present draft 3 of the next special committee of the whole budget meeting on December 21st, 2022 for these two specific items, planning, capital office layout, and the tearaway map. A mover. Councillor Marchand, a seconder. Councillor Darash, call for the vote. All in favor? And opposed? That is carried. And for the record, Councillor Waters did not vote. Whew. We're moving on. C is question period from the medium public. I'll have you go to the podium if you can, please, Mr. McKenty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Once again, thanks for hearing me out. It's really hard to argue against a really good idea. And ever since I got here at 6 o'clock tonight, all I've heard is some great ideas. And in my view, as an outsider looking in the tent, as each of these ideas and these items that we've identified tonight, they're great, and I think we should just check them all off and let's all go home. But the reality is, and I keep coming back to this central point, people are scared to death. Our residents are scared to death about our economic future in the short term and in the medium term as we head into 2023. I just heard on the news here driving over here tonight for 6 o'clock, the Bank of Canada today has raised the interest rates for the 7th time since April. And our interest rate, the base interest rate today is now at the same rate as it was in 1980. And I'm old enough to remember 1980, when I thought I had a good deal on my mortgage at 21%. And I just keep coming back. A very simple question. I just ask council to be very mindful in putting all of this big budget together. Keep that in mind, that people are asking, how am I going to pay for this? I listened to our Director of Fire and Emergency Services, Paul Ryan. I have the greatest of respect. We have to have that. We need to identify what is really nice to have and what do we absolutely have to have. So when I hear him say, you know, we got in the budget, we need to paint the walls in the fire bays, I'm going, you know, my living room needs a paint job too, but I think I'm just going to have to put that off a bit. And then in the next sentence, he's talking about making some renovations to the back door as a fire or as a safety issue. I'm all for that. And that's a good comparison. Or should we take that money and buy the bunker gear? I say absolutely yes. But we really need to ask ourselves, hard and loud, how much do we really have to paint those bays? How much do we really have to do this update study on our Parks and Rec that was done back in 2014? Couldn't we just put that off maybe till the fall or maybe the spring afterward? I'd really like to buy a new snowblower, but I'm going to have to put that off. I'm going down to the hardware store to buy shovel instead. And to get me through until times get better that we can really afford this stuff. So that's really my point. And put in the form of a question, I just ask council to be mindful throughout all of these decisions and your decision-making process in putting this complicated budget together. I have the greatest of respect that, at the end of it, we'll get to where we need to be, but it's not going to be an easy road to travel down.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other members of the public have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor LaRose, second by Councillor Marchand. We'll call for the vote. All in favor?